Okay, so we have been looking at the idea of impermanence and the perception of impermanence yesterday, and we're going to continue to looking at the idea of perceptions, how to think about a variety of things, and the next sutta gives some nice similes for the five khandhas. The five khandhas are the five aspects of existence, the five ways in which the Buddha normally analyzes a being, a human being or any being for that matter. And these are like the prime areas of investigation if you want to understand what the human being actually is. This is what you investigate in terms of impermanence, suffering, and especially non-self, the five khandhas. And the similes gives us some kind of access to those five khandhas, how to think about them, and it makes clear how they are affected by these characteristics as you contemplate them in this way, using these particular similes. It's called the Pena Pinda Upama Sutta. Pena is foam, Pinda is like a lump, and Upama is a simile. It's the simile of the lump of foam sutta. And this is quite a well-known sutta because it's one of the few places that gives a very kind of clear idea of what the khandhas are, how they work, and similes are often very powerful ways of expressing meaning and expressing, kind of approaching a particular subject. So we're going to look at this and see where that takes us. So this is in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Connected Discourses of the Buddha, 22nd chapter, which is the Khandha Samyutta, the Connected Discourses on the five khandhas, the five, often called the five aggregates, but five aspects of personality is perhaps more meaningful. And then sutta number 95 in that collection. And this is how it goes. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Ayodhya on the bank of the Ganges River. There, the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, suppose the Ganges River was carrying along a big lump of foam, and a person with clear eyes would see it and contemplate it, examining it carefully, and it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a lump of foam? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of form at all, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, near or far, examining it carefully, and it appears to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in form? So that is the first of the five khandhas, the form khandha. And you can see here the words that are used here, void, hollow, and insubstantial. They point to the idea of non-self. All of these are non-self ideas. Void means that there is no essence. There is nothing solid in these things. Hollow is a similar kind of idea. When you look at it properly, there's nothing really there at the end of the day. It just falls apart. And insubstantial is a similar word as without essence. No substance means no essence. So this points us to the direction of things being without a self, or without inherent essence. And also, of course, the idea of the simile of foam here also give a powerful sense of things being impermanent. Foam is obviously very impermanent. Bubbles and these things are very impermanent. So it gives an idea of impermanence at the same time. And in all of this, suffering is implied because you grasp onto that which is impermanent, and you suffer because of that. So all the three characteristics are really implied here. But the main kind of emphasis is on the idea of non-self. And also impermanence is also very strongly implied by these things. So suppose the river Ganges carries along a lump of foam. So the first thing then it says here, which is interesting, is the idea that you have to First of all, you have to have clear eyes. So clear eyes is what is clear eyes? That's a very good question. So let's look at what the clear eyes, how that is defined here in the in this particular sutta. So just give me 1 second. I will try to bring this up. So we have the discourses with the aggregates. Okay, going to number 95, Bhante Sudatta's translation, lump of foam. Here we are. No, that's no good. Okay, so I don't have any internet access here, so I'm going to have to go via existing what I have already. So let's see. Just bear with me. I'm almost there. Okay, so here we are. So clear eyes is just chakuma. Chakuma literally means having eyes. That's what it means. So someone who has eyes, and obviously the implication probably is that the eyes are clear. You can see properly, in other words. But the main point here is that you see it, you contemplate it, and you examine it carefully. And this is one of those things that you always see throughout the suttas. That whenever we want to understand something, you have to undertake this kind of seeing things clearly. You have to undertake the effort that it means to examine something, to reflect on something, to contemplate something. And then gradually, as that contemplation deepens, gradually the meaning comes out. And you may have noticed this in your own life, how slowly meaning emerges out of things. And then you say, okay, now I understand, right? Now I understand. And then the next day you come, oh, now I understand. And then the next day, now I understand. Yeah, it's like this gradual emergence. And it's this feeling of discovery. And it's very exciting. Yeah, it's this kind of this is probably the most exciting kind of journey of discovery that any human being can happen to be on. Because here we are discovering ourselves, we're understanding the nature, we're understanding how the world works, how we work. What could be more interesting than that? And of course, the treasure at the end of this process of discovery is the most valuable treasure anyone could ever hope to find. The highest happiness, the ending of suffering. So this, to me, is like a real journey of exploration, very interesting, exciting. But you have to keep on examining. You have to keep on reflecting. What do these things mean? Only then does the meaning emerge from these phenomena. So you examine that lump of foam. And as you examine it, you see somehow it comes into existence. Bubbles form. They start out with just water, and then bubbles form, and it builds up somehow because maybe there is some waste products or something that cause the form to build up. Often it comes because of waste products. And it forms and it builds up, and its shape is always changing. And then eventually the shape changes, and eventually it starts dying out. It disappears, and it goes back into the river again. This is the idea of bubbles or a foam on the river. And form is like that. When we talk about form, it means anything in the world that has a certain shape, has an appearance. It's all about appearances. But the main appearance for human beings, the most thing that we hold on to the most, is our own appearance. It is our own body that also has a certain appearance to it. And that body that we have then is a bit like this foam. It arises out of the ground. It comes out of these elements in the ground. Someone wanted to have an element contemplation. And this is really a kind of element contemplation when you think about this foam in the right way. So the foam, it arises out of the ground, built up out of rice and porridge. That's what it says in the suttas. The body is built out of rice and porridge. It forms out of the four elements, the water element, the earth element, all coming together. And then the body starts to form. And then you get born, you get born, you are a human being, and you change over life. You become bigger and bigger and bigger, all different directions. And then you get older and older, and gradually you kind of shrivel in a sense, and eventually you fade away, and then you die, and the elements dissipate back into the ground again. You can almost see, you can put a fast, fast forward your life in that way, put everything into 5 seconds, how you emerge out of the ground, emerge out of the 4 elements, and then become older and older and older. You see this in the fast forward. And actually it's kind of, when you see it in that way, the change, and then going back into the ground again, then it's kind of, why am I holding on to this body? What is this body anyway, apart from these 4 elements coming and then getting old, then getting kind of unpleasant, and then gradually dissolving back into the ground again. You can almost see yourself as a tree growing out of the ground, and then eventually kind of then falling back into the ground again. You can make this quite visual, to make it more than just a rational thinking about the elements, but make it into something visual like that. Fast forward your whole life into 3 seconds, kind of getting old, and bang, disappearing back again into the ground, something like that, And it's some of these ways of thinking, you will find that they have a very big impact on you. And it's very hard to kind of grasp onto the body when you see the body in this sort of way, because the body just doesn't, it loses all its interest. It belongs to nature, it belongs to the world. And anyway, this kind of body which is changing all the time and going on to old age and death, how interesting can it possibly be? There's nothing there that is really interesting. There's nothing there to hold on to. It's just this process changing and gradually becoming ugly and then disappearing back into the ground again eventually. So this is the idea of foam, all appearance in the world being like foam, always changing. You can also do that for any kind of other forms in the world, any kind of other shapes or appearances in the world. They're all subject to the same idea. They arise, they change, and eventually they kind of dissolve somehow into something else. The whole universe is like that. But the most important thing is to do it to things that you are attached to, and seeing them arising in this way, and then disappearing again. And this is the idea with this sort of contemplation. And that is a way of doing the 4-element contemplation as well. Make it visual in this way, and then it becomes powerful. So you see, when you do it this way, you see how void it all is. And you will notice here that, very importantly, it says here, any kind of form at all. Sabbang rupang is the Pali for this. So all form is included in this. Not only all form in the present, but all form in the past and future and the present. And then you come the idea of internal and external. Internal then usually means your body, and external means, everything else. Coarse or fine, it doesn't matter how refined it is. Even the Devaloka is still subject to these kind of things. Devaloka have the fine material form. Let's see what it says here. Oh, this has all been contracted, so I can't see what it says. Okay, never mind. It's panitang oladikang. Sukkamava, oladikang va sukkamava, oladikang sukkamava. That's what it is, I think, you're right. So coarse or fine, inferior, superior, hinang va, panitang va, if inferior, superior, near or far away, young, do it, young, how does that go again? Santike, okay. So santike, which is near, and then far. So it kind of, that's what it comes back to. How come it's not here? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this is the idea. The idea here is that all form is included in this, all rupa, and it doesn't really matter what kind of rupa we're talking about. And all of that is then to be seen in this particular way as hollow, void, and insubstantial. And that's what it comes down to. So this is very important. When talking about the 5 khandhas, the body khandha or the rupa khandha is in many ways the most basic one. Yeah, always in the Dhamma, everything is structured, everything has a certain sequence, and there is a reason why rupa comes first. Rupa comes first because it is the most basic, the most foundational. And by dealing with that rupa, dealing with the form of the body, you are then dealing with the most coarser things, and you can move on to more refined things later on. That's what you see in the Satipatthana Sutta, the breath contemplation. The most basic is rupa, then comes Vedana, then comes Chitta. Chitta is many of these factors coming together. And so when you deal with this kind of gets the body out of the way, and it opens up the way for Samadhi afterwards. So this is the first of these ones. Now let us come to the second of the 5 aggregates. Suppose it was the time of autumn, when the rain was falling heavily, and a bubble on the water forms and pops right away. And a person with clear eyes would see it, contemplate it, examining it carefully. And it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a water bubble? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of feeling at all. All kinds of feeling, near and far, subtle and coarse, etc., examining it carefully. And it appears to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in feeling here? So again, this is the idea here, even more impermanent than the body, obviously, than physical phenomena. It's just a bubble that forms and it pops right away. And feelings in the body are like that, or feelings at all in general are like that. They come and they go very, very quickly. And one moment you may have a pain, then you may experience something happy, and then you have something painful again. It's kind of very, very ephemeral and very impermanent, and it changes all the time. And of course, it is very, very useful to see this, because as I mentioned the other day, feelings are the things that give life meaning and value. Without feelings, there is nothing. This is the kind of the source that drives us, what motivates us to do anything in life. Feelings. And so for that reason, we're seeing feelings in this way. It's very powerful. And again, you can do this in meditation practice. The most important thing here is this idea, again, that feelings, sometimes they cease completely. Certain feelings are completely gone and not really accessible. And that's when this idea of the feelings popping and disappearing becomes especially powerful. Because when they cease completely and they're beyond your access, it means that they are, they are completely impermanent, utterly out of your control. And then that kind of allows you to understand that life does not have that meaning that you thought it had, because you cannot control that very thing that carries meaning in life. That very thing is out of control. And that means that there is a problem with the kind of values that we normally have. And so this changes your entire reflection, ultimately leads to awakening, because the carrier of meaning itself is non-self in this way. And so feelings just come and go, they pop and they re-arise, they are incredibly unreliable. And it means, of course, this means that they are out of control. And because they're out of control, and because they come according to cause and conditions, they are void, hollow, and insubstantial. There's nothing there to be held on to. There's nothing that you can really control in any way whatsoever. Suppose that in the last month of summer, at noon, a shimmering mirage appears, and a person with clear eyes would see it, contemplate it, examining it carefully, and it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a mirage? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of perception at all. Past, future, and present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, near or far, examining it carefully. And it appears to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in perception? Yeah, perception is how we make sense of the world. Perception is how we can distinguish things from each other. Perception is how this mass of sense input that comes into us is made into sensible information that we can talk about, that we can communicate about. But these perceptions are very, very uncertain. Yeah, the same scene, the same ideas can give rise to happiness or it can give rise to sorrow, depending on where your mental state is. What you bring to that perception, what you bring to that sense experience is more important than the sense experience itself. And this is this idea of the attention that we have, the idea of the Madhupindika Sutta, the Honeyball Sutta, is that the attention that we bring to any conscious experience and the experience that we have is the most important for what actually happens afterwards, whether it's good or bad, whether we proliferate about it or not, whether we take it as something within our control or not. All of that depends on the attention we bring to bear upon that experience. And so the actual experience itself is really very, very uncertain and very, very unreliable. And this is even more so when it comes to abstract things. Okay, there are certain things that are immediate, that we kind of things that we see. You know, you could argue that, okay, whether you're an arahant or you're a putujana, this room is still going to be this room, to some extent. Of course, the arahant will see it differently, will have a greater appreciation or a full appreciation of its impermanence. The arahant will be able to see this room either as delightful or as ugly, just by change of perception like that, depending on whether you see it as impermanent or whether you see it as a place where we, do something positive together. So the arahant has this full control over their perceptions, can change them at will. Most people can't do that. So the world around us, the physical world, is to some extent limited. We can only change our perception so far. But the world of ideas, the world in the mind, is very, very fluid, and things can change very, very rapidly. And the idea, and this is kind of the idea behind developing perceptions that we are talking about here, because the idea of impermanence is at the idea level. I mean, it certainly has to do with the world, but it's how we interpret that world, how we see it. And so we see it either as solid or we see it as impermanent. And so we develop these perceptions, and you start to see the mirage-like nature of things around us. It's a very obvious one is, how do we see people? We're talking about before about developing the mind in compassion and kindness. We talked about the sutta called the Agata Pativinya Sutta, the removing of resentment sutta. How does that happen? How is it that one moment you can feel angry with someone, the next moment you can see them as your friend? What is the difference? And the difference is just the perception at that time. It's like a mirage. Are they your enemy or are they your friend? Actually, they are just another person. They are neither your enemy nor your friend. It just depends on the perception that you bring into that situation. And it's very kind of volatile, very uncertain. And on the one hand, that's terrible, because it means that we cannot control anything in the world. Whether we perceive things one way or the other will depend on all of these causes and conditions, internal and external. So on the one hand, it is kind of bad news. It means that the world is in the way that we don't want the world to be. But on the other hand, it also gives us the opportunity to practice, to develop our perceptions. And this is kind of the beautiful thing about this. If they're hollow, insubstantial, if they arise out of cause and conditions, then what we have to do is put those cause and conditions into place, and then we can change our whole world. Because perception is such an incredibly important part of the world. It is maybe the most important thing, in the sense that that is our experience, is tied up with that. The feelings we have will depend on those perceptions. Form is just another kind of perception, really. So perception is like fundamental part again of reality, how we relate to the world around us. So the fact that that is very malleable, the fact that we can develop that, the fact that the Buddha talks about developing perception so often in the suttas, is also a cause for optimism, because it means that we can change all of these relationships that we have with the world. And this is what this really is about. And this is like the development of vipassana, if you wish, clarity about the world, seeing things more clearly. And then you bring your perceptions in line with what the world around us actually is like. So remember the uncertainty in all of this, how very kind of unreliable everything is. And for that reason, it feels so much that things are solid. It feels that this is the way it is. But we always overestimate the solidity of the world. It is not really all that solid at all. And so changes can be made. And this is kind of the good news here. So that is the idea of the perceptions. It's like a mirage. It's kind of, there's nothing there, right? The mirage is kind of completely empty here. You know, the kind of mirage is like, when you travel on the road and it looks like there's water on the road far away ahead of you, and it's just heat on the road. You come there, there's nothing there at all. Similar thing, and we see in the desert sometimes. It's just the heat creating the fiction, or there's nothing, there's no substance to it whatsoever. So this is now we're getting on very kind of thin ice. Bubbles, at least there's some reality to bubbles. Well, this is kind of really, there's nothing at all going on with perception, it seems. It's really empty of substance. So feelings are more real than that, and whereas these perceptions are really, there's nothing at all going on with these perceptions. Okay. So let us go on to the next one. Suppose there was a person in need of heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood. They would take a sharp axe and enter a forest. There they would see a big banana tree, straight and young and grown, free of defects. They'd cut it down at the base, cut off the top, and unroll the coiled sheaths. But they wouldn't even find sapwood, much less heartwood. And a person with clear eyes would see it and contemplate it and examine it carefully here. And it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a banana tree here? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of will or choices or intentions, however you want to say this, or translate this. At all, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior, superior, near or far, examining it carefully, examining them carefully, and they appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in choices? So this is kind of also very interesting. What substance is there to choices? It feels like we are making choices. It feels like we are behind this. It feels like our choices have some sort of meaning to us. And they do have a kind of meaning to us. But that meaning itself is this very shifting all the time, depending on cause and conditions. When you make a choice about your favorite food, in a few years' time, maybe that favorite food will change and you like something else. Certainly from life to life, it will change enormously what you actually enjoy and what you like. What you choose, what is important to you in life, is just conditioned. There is nothing really going on there beneath the surface. And one of those kind of interesting things, because now that we're talking about choices, we're coming back to this idea of free will again. And to me, it kind of seems obvious that there cannot be any free will because our choices are conditioned. The only way you can have free will is that you have something which is outside of this nexus of conditions and causes in the world, something that stands outside of cause and conditions. If everything is just part of the web of cause and conditions, then everything must be caused by those cause and conditions. Either that, or it is standing outside, and then you have a self, then you have a God, then you have an essence, or it is random, and randomness doesn't really get you anywhere either. So everything is part of this causal network, and choices are part of that. So free will doesn't make any sense, but actually it does make sense from a different perspective, and this is like the Buddhist perspective of free will. Because the problem is not so much that we can make choices independently. The problem is that our choices are constrained. Our choices are limited. They are limited by our own delusion, by our own stupidity, by our own desires, by our own ill will. So you have the choice. When you go for lunch, you have the choice. You can have an apple or you can have a pear. Yeah, you can have noodles or rice. You can have, these are kind of our choices usually in life. They are very, very limited. And we think that's great to be able to choose between an apple. I don't like pears, I like apples, I can choose apple. Great, okay, good. Yeah, that's good that we can make that choice, but it's incredibly small. Yeah, whether you like one or the other, it kind of makes almost no difference. Your next life, you're going to grow up in a different culture, and you will like pears, not apples, right? It's kind of just random, basically, whether you like one or the other. But those things that are really worthwhile choosing, you can't choose them because you don't know that they exist. You don't know how to access them. What are those things really worth choosing? Well, things like deep samadhi, for example. Most people don't even know that it exists. So why don't they know that it exists? The reason is because they are deluded. They haven't got insight. They don't understand the nature of reality. And that is the real big problem with free will, is that whatever it is, even if there were free will, you can't choose those things that are really worthwhile choosing because you are limited by delusion, by lack of understanding and insight and desires and all of these kind of things. And that is the real problem of free will from a Buddhist point of perspective. So all that free will that we normally talk about in the kind of, that we normally discuss, that is a stupid free will anyway. It is irrelevant to our lives largely. It doesn't matter. The real free will that matters is the removal of the hindrances, removal of the defilements that block us from actually making choices that are really worthwhile. That is the real issue when it comes to will. And so our choices are kind of hollow. They are meaningless because we don't even know what to choose. So why are we so concerned about these stupid choices? And that is why, far more important than having free will, being able to choose the apple or the pear, far more important it is to remove those defilements that block us from making meaningful choices in the first place. And so free will, even if there were free will, it is completely overrated. Because actually there's nothing to choose from anyway. So why are we so worried about this? We're looking in the wrong place. The right place to look is the removal of defilements, to open up new avenues that otherwise will be completely closed. If we really understood happiness and suffering, everyone would be enlightened, because that is what matters. That is where real happiness is to be found. But that is not open to us because of our stupidity and delusion here. And so then we have this idea of peeling the banana tree, right? The banana tree is a bit like an onion. You just peel off layer after layer. You have this kind of big leaves on the banana tree, and you peel off, and then you come to the center, and there is nothing there. And then you do a similar thing with your choices in meditation practice. As you become more peaceful, you're leaving the leaves, one leaf at the time, one layer of onion at the time. You're peeling it off, and you leave it behind. You're becoming more peaceful, and then you take another layer off. You're becoming more peaceful, and you become another layer off. You become more peaceful, until eventually you become so peaceful that all the layers of choice have been peeled away, and then there is nothing remaining. You become completely still. The will is completely gone, and when the will is completely gone, there's nothing there anymore. The will is gone, and it's okay. You didn't need the will. In fact, the will was only a problem. That's what you discover when you come into this very profound states of meditation. And so the will is now completely gone. And if the will is completely gone, well, it means that it's not part of you. It is not essential. It is void. You can exist without the will. You can have this pure experience of bliss without doing anything at all. And that's perfectly okay. In fact, it is not just okay, it is far superior. And so the meditation process, as you leave things behind, as you still the mind, as aspects of the will are dropped off stage by stage, is the same idea as the peeling of the onion. Not peeling it, but taking it off layer by layer until eventually you come to the core of the banana tree and there's nothing there. It is empty inside. And that emptiness is very beautiful, it turns out. So this is the idea of choices, or the will being empty, not being anything there. You can peel it apart, take it apart, and eventually it just goes and it's gone, and you are much better off for it. And now we come to the last of the 5 khandhas, and this is the khandha of consciousness. In the same way, a mendicant sees and suppose a magician or their apprentice was to perform a magic trick at the crossroads, and a person with clear eyes would see it, contemplate it, examining it carefully, and it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a magic trick? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of consciousness at all, sabbang vijnanang, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, near or far, examining it carefully, and it appears to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in consciousness? So consciousness here means awareness. Consciousness means the ability to know. Consciousness means the core aspect of what makes up the mind. There is no mind without consciousness. Consciousness is effectively what mind does, having awareness of whatever is happening in the world. This is what is meant by consciousness here. It's important to understand consciousness in the right way here. And this is kind of the root, the final thing, the final barrier to understanding reality properly. This is the final, in the kind of final analysis, what many religions and spiritual paths in the world take as the ultimate reality is consciousness in one way or the other. The merging of the Atman with the Brahman. The kind of the Godhead, or whatever they might call it in Christianity, or whatever, this kind of world spirit or something like that. This is kind of what often is the ultimate, considered the ultimate reality. And then comes the Buddha along and says, no, that too actually is uncertain, unreliable, hollow, empty, etc., insubstantial. And so this then is very interesting, and this is where we come to the kind of the thing that makes the Buddha's teachings special, that differentiates it from all other spiritual and religious teachings and philosophical teachings or what have you in the world. This is what makes the Buddha in a sense. And so he compares consciousness to a magic trick. Is it magic? What is it? It's kind of really hard to pin down consciousness once you start looking at it. What is it? Consciousness always appears together with an object. There's always some content to the consciousness. Consciousness never exists on its own. And I think that is why it is like a magic trick in a sense. It cannot exist on its own. You can't separate it out. You can't say, this is consciousness. Usually when you want to show what something is, you take away all the things that it is not. And we were talking about before the idea of mind. You contemplate mind, the Chittanupassana, according to the Satipatthana Sutta. The third tetrad of the Anapanasati Sutta is a contemplation of mind. So what does it mean to contemplate mind? Well, what it means is you take away all the things that are not mind. And when you take away all the things that are not mind, you are left with mind. So mind is then not the 5 senses, not the body, that sort of thing. That's what mind is, because all not mind is taken away. But if you take away all the things that are not consciousness, there's nothing there. So consciousness cannot be distilled in that way. You cannot kind of separate it out. It always exists in relation with something else. And that is why I think it is like a magic trick. What is actually real? Is it the object or is it the consciousness? Consciousness depends on the objects for its existence. Without, it cannot exist. In the suttas, the form and the I, that is what gives rise to consciousness. Every moment, it's always a form and the I, the sound and the ear, the idea and the mind. Then consciousness comes because of that. And so consciousness is kind of very kind of very hard to pin down in this way. But what we can say about consciousness is that it depends on the object. It always comes together with something else. In the suttas it says that it's always perception, feeling and consciousness always come together in one package. These things are always kind of a part and parcel of the same thing. So consciousness always lives or exists in this way. So if we make an end of all of the things in the world, if you reject all states of existence, in other words, all the objects of consciousness, because no state of existence is satisfactory, if you reject all of that, in the end you also reject consciousness itself, because consciousness depends on those things. And then everything is gone. And so this is kind of what the Dhamma ultimately comes down to. It's very, very radical in this way. And then you have understood really what the Buddha's teaching is all about as a consequence of that. And very importantly here is this idea that when you contemplate that consciousness, again it says any kind of consciousness at all, sabbang vijnanang. All states of awareness, all states of knowing is what this means. And so that there isn't any kind of consciousness that is apart from this. There is no consciousness that exists beyond the phenomena of the world or whatever. All consciousness is included. And that is a very important point because it's not as if you can kind of set aside certain aspects of your mind and kind of put them to one side. This is the real awareness beyond all other awarenesses. Well, no, all consciousness is marked by this problem of being hollow, insubstantial and non-self, being ultimately anicca, impermanent, unreliable, and because of all of that, it is also dukkha at the end of the day. All consciousness is included in this. So all of these things are, these are things you can contemplate to some extent, and you can see them to some extent. But in the end, you have to come back to the meditation practice to see this really deeply. As the mind, as the phenomena of the world fade away, it becomes more clear how they are insubstantial and hollow in this way. So through the mindfulness of breathing, through that sort of meditation, you will be able to gradually approach this idea of the five khandhas being hollow in this way, being insubstantial and being impermanent and subject to cessation as a consequence. And when you do that, then what happens is the following. Seeing this, a learned disciple grows disillusioned with form, grows disillusioned or grows averse or rejects, if you like, form, rejects feeling, rejects perception, rejects choices, rejects consciousness. Rejecting, desire fades away. When desire fades away, they are freed. When they're freed, they know they are freed. They understand there is no return to any state of existence. Everything is contracted a bit, but there is no more birth, and there is no more further state of existence. Is what this says. So when you see form and these things in this way, when you understand it is hollow, when you understand it is out of control, when you understand that it will always lead to suffering, you can't control it, feelings come and go, whatever you want to, those feelings are just, they arise because of cause and conditions. Our ability to control our feelings are very limited. Most of the time there is no control. And then you just reject everything because you understand ultimately everything is just dukkha. This is really highly problematic. This is what you see when you go deep in meditation. It may be hard for you to understand this now. For most people it is hard to understand, but it becomes very obvious when the meditation is profound enough. So you don't really have to worry too much about it. Just have an open mind and see what happens. And what is, of course, beautiful is that the mind that sees these things is the very blissful mind, which is kind of weird. You think that this sounds like a terrible thing to see these things, seeing all the dukkha or whatever, but actually it arises out of bliss. And that is what makes it kind of possible to have this kind of insight, because it arises in the mind that is very stable, very powerful, and you're able to take in the data as they are, and then the consequences of those data, which is this letting go of the entire world in this particular way. That is the result of seeing things clearly. And if you don't see those things clearly, it means you will carry on in dukkha and get reborn here and there, and then there is a very serious problem as a consequence. So when you reject everything, then you no longer desire it because you reject it. It is no good. And because you have no desire for anything anymore, you are freed. That is the freedom. What are you freed from? You are freed from dukkha. You are freed from rebirth. You are freed from, those are the main things. You can also argue you're freed from defilements. This is kind of what you are freed from. And you are out of jail, basically. The jail is gone, and you are very happy as a consequence. And when you are freed, you understand there is no return to any state of existence. So there you are. That is the what is it called again? Penu Pindaka, Pena Pind Upama Sutta, the lumper form Sutta. So. Okay, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you. Now we're going to look at some more perceptions, and these are nicely summarized. Many of these perceptions summarized in the Girimananda Sutta, which is found in the Numerical Discourses in the 10th chapter, and this is Sutta number 60. And the Girimananda Sutta is quite well known because it is often chanted as a paritta chant around the Buddhist world. The paritta is like a protection chant or a blessing chant that is done in various situations, and this is one of these ones. And you will see in a second why that is the case, because basically the Buddha says that it can be used in this way at the very beginning here. So this is how it goes. So we're just going to start very careful in the sutta, and we will look at it more later on today here. So at one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery here. Now at that time, Venerable Girimananda was sick, suffering, and gravely ill. Then Venerable Ananda went to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Sir, Venerable Girimananda is sick, suffering, and gravely ill. Sir, please go to Venerable Girimananda out of compassion." So this is a kind of standard thing you see in the sutta. Someone is suffering and gravely ill. It's like, I guess they are afraid that the person is going to die. And so they ask the Buddha to go there out of compassion. It's a kind of a common trope in the suttas. You see this in many different places. Giri Mananda. Giri is hill. Ananda is like bliss or happiness, so it means like bliss on the hill. That's the name of this person. Ananda, if you were to recite to the mendicant Girimananda these 10 perceptions, it is possible that after hearing them, his illness will die down on the spot. So that is why this is becomes a paritta. It becomes a chant that we do because it helps people to overcome their illness according to this particular sutta. So, interesting here. This monk Girimananda, he is not actually encountered anywhere else in the sutta. This is the only place, so it is like a kind of unusual sutta in that sense. I'm also not sure. I don't think there is any parallel suttas to this one, if my memory is correct. So it's also kind of slightly special to the Theravada tradition, this particular sutta. And some of the things in here are a little bit unusual, but most of it is perfectly in line with what you see elsewhere in the suttas. And so these 10 perceptions then are what you recite, and then the monk Girimananda hopefully will come out of his illness based on that. So what are these 10? The perceptions of impermanence, not self, ugliness, drawbacks, giving up, fading away, cessation, dissatisfaction with the whole world, impermanence of all phenomena, and mindfulness of breathing. These are the 10 perceptions. And you may wonder, how can reciting something like this make someone become healthy? It sounds a bit strange, perhaps. It gets even stranger when you look at some of the other suttas. If you go to the Samyutta Nikaya, specifically to the Kanda Samyutta again, there are 3 suttas in there that talk about, the Bojjhanga Samyutta is what I'm trying to say, the 7 factors of awakening. And if you go to the Bojjhanga Samyutta, there's 3 suttas in a row that talk about reciting the 7 Bojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening, and then the person emerges from illness. And some of these people that emerge, they are arahants. Mahachunda, he is sick, and I think he's one of them. And then there is the Buddha himself is sick. And then they recite the Bojjhangas to the Buddha, and then he emerges from his illness. And it's kind of strange. You wonder what is going on there. How come, why does this work? And I think I don't know exactly what is going on, but I suspect it has to do with the fact that you are sick and maybe your energy is low and you have a problem maybe it's just problem recalling the Dhamma properly. And then someone comes along and they kind of recite these things in a powerful way, someone who is healthy. They remind you essentially of the Dhamma. That may brighten up your mind because it's coming. Maybe sometimes you need that external support a little bit. Maybe even as the Buddha. I don't know. That's what it looks like anyway. And that reminder of the Dhamma brings up the corresponding qualities. And of course, those corresponding qualities are powerful bliss, powerful peace, powerful stillness, and maybe you enter some powerful state of samadhi as a consequence, or maybe there's something else going on as well. And then, based on that, then the illness, because body and mind are so closely connected, the illness then somehow dies down because of the power of the mind in that particular situation. Something like that. Or maybe there's something more to it. I'm not entirely sure. It is a little bit mysterious what exactly is going on here. And so then this particular sutta would then be a similar kind of idea. You hear the Dhamma, and then your mind gets uplifted, you feel happy as a consequence of that, brings up all of these powerful qualities, and then somehow that then seems to affect the illness of the body, and you come out of that illness as a consequence. So these 10 perceptions, and they are all kind of related to each other in a large number of ways, and they all kind of come down really to the 3 characteristics, the idea of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, but there are various angles on that particular problem. So let's just start with a few of these perceptions, and then we can look at in more details later on today here. So what is the perception of impermanence? Is when a mendicant has gone to a wilderness, to the root of a tree, to an empty hut, and reflects like this. Form is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, choices are impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. And so they meditate observing impermanence in the 5 grasping aggregates, or the 5 grasping aspects of personality, or the 5 aspects of personality that are grasped. All of these are valid translations of this. And this is called the perception of impermanence, or if you like, unreliability or uncertainty or whatever. And so the first point here to be made is that you will notice it starts off by saying you go to the wilderness, the root of a tree, or to an empty hut. And so what that indicates is that we are here dealing with profound meditation. Always when we deal with deep meditation in the suttas, it is always explained in this particular way. You go into solitude, you go away. Why? Because that is what allows you to enter samadhi. And from that samadhi, that is where these reflections become possible. And that alerts us to the fact that what we are talking about here is not some basic kind of understanding. It is a profound understanding of these things. In fact, it is exactly the same kind of understanding that we saw in the Anapanasati Sutta, the mindfulness of breathing sutta. Yeah, we go through the various stages of calming down the mind, bringing the mind to samadhi, the vimochayang chittang, and based on that samadhi, you do the last 4 steps of anapanasati, aniccanupassi, viraganupassi, nirodhanupassi, which basically is this, seeing the impermanence in these things. And so that is what this is about. So you go through that sequence in anapanasati, or perhaps some other meditation that makes you very, very peaceful. And then you look at the process of how the khandhas fade away through that process of stilling. And then you understand the impermanence of the khandhas on that basis, especially through the aspect of cessation, because cessation is the deepest way in which things are impermanent, disappearing completely, gone once and for all. And then you really understand what impermanence means. Prior to that, it is still a bit shaky, but then it becomes kind of absolutely solid at a particular point. So this is based on deep meditation, and so in this way you meditate observing the impermanence of the 5 khandhas. This is called the perception of impermanence. We've already looked at this in quite a bit of detail, and so I think that may be sufficient for the idea of the 5 khandhas and seeing them as impermanent. Of course, another way of seeing them as impermanent and reflecting on them is the Penupindupama Sutta that we just looked at before, the idea of the lump of foam simile. It's a simile, it's a different angle on the same thing, but sometimes it can be very useful. And it is more easily accessible because you don't necessarily have to have deep meditation. You can understand that also more immediately. And then you bring that similes of the 5 khandhas in together with your experience, and then kind of your understanding becomes much deeper as a consequence of that. So you bring all of this together in this particular way, and then you start to understand these 5 khandhas. You start to understand what you are really made of, what is at your core, who you really are, or maybe what you are not. This is one of those kind of things that Ajahn Brahmali always says. How should you contemplate the 5 khandhas? And sometimes people say, well, you should ask who you are. But if you ask who you are, maybe you're already making the wrong assumption. The assumption that you are something. Who am I? And then, of course, if you ask the wrong question, you may never get the answer. And so that is actually the wrong question to ask. I remember Ajahn Brahmali taught this a long time ago, maybe 30 years ago or something, when he was really kind of getting into really deep meditations and I'm not saying that his meditation hasn't changed, but the way he expressed himself was so different in those days. And he was saying, you should never ask who you are. You should always ask, what do I take myself to be? In other words, where is the illusion of a self? What do I take myself to be? Where is the illusion of self? Where is it hanging out? And then when you investigate that area that you take yourself to be, that is where the profound insight can come. Because if you take yourself to be this, and actually that is empty, that is hollow, that is impermanent, that is when very profound insights can emerge, because of that. So sometimes we need to ask the right kind of questions. And when you ask the right kind of questions, then you get useful answers. Ask the wrong questions and you make no progress whatsoever, and you may end up seeing things, continuing your delusions, seeing things that are not really there. And then, of course, you will not be able to fulfill or to take these beautiful teachings and practice them all the way to the end. And that would be a shame. And then you'll be blocked and things would not happen as they should happen and as the Buddha would like us to practice to make an end of suffering. So I'm going to stop there for this morning, and we will continue the Girmananda Sutta this afternoon, and we'll see where it all takes us then. In the meantime, please keep on enjoying yourself, have a nice lunch, and we'll see you at 3 o'clock.